They thought they could hurt you and walk away like nothing happened. They thought you would break, spiral, or spend your life seeking revenge. But here's what they didn't see coming. The universe has a memory, and every betrayal, every lie, every scar they left on your soul is now a seed of their own undoing. You didn't need to fight back, because something greater than you already started fighting for you. Not with noise, not with chaos, but with silent justice. This isn't just karma. This is divine correction unfolding in ways they'll never see coming until it's too late. The first consequence for those who hurt you isn't public humiliation or financial loss. It's the quiet collapse of their own peace of mind. They thought they could walk away untouched, that they could betray you, use you, lie to you, and carry on like nothing ever happened. But the first battle they lose isn't in the world outside. It's within. No one escapes their own conscience. You can block a number, delete a photo, avoid a place, but you can't delete your own memory. You can't outrun your own thoughts. And you definitely can't silence your conscience when it starts to whisper at 2 a.m. when the world is asleep and there's no distraction left to numb the guilt. That's when the cracks begin to show. They may laugh with friends, post happy updates online, or pretend everything is fine, but deep down, they feel it, a growing discomfort they can't explain, a gnawing anxiety, a heavy silence behind the smile, a real-life story. A woman once shared how her closest friend abandoned her during the darkest chapter of her life. That friend never apologized, just disappeared. For a while, she seemed unaffected, but months later, she admitted to mutual friends that she couldn't sleep, not because of drama, not because of consequences, but because of guilt. Every time she heard a song they once loved, passed a familiar place, or saw a quote about loyalty, the memory returned like a ghost. No punishment was needed. The mind punished itself. Your silence becomes the mirror they can't look away from. You didn't clap back. You didn't get even. You went quiet. And that silence, it echoed louder than any confrontation ever could. Because silence is a mirror. It doesn't scream. It reflects. And when they look at your silence, they see what they lost. They see who they became. They start asking themselves the questions they've tried to suppress. Why did I do that? What if I was the problem? Did I just destroy something I'll never find again? That's not a moment of regret. That's the beginning of internal collapse. This is emotional intelligence in action. When you have emotional intelligence, you know you don't need to argue to prove someone wrong. You don't need revenge to feel powerful. You just let people deal with the consequences of violating your peace. And believe me, the loss of peace is the first warning shot from the universe. Sleepless nights, restless minds. You may not see it, but they feel it. It starts with a passing thought. Then it becomes a recurring dream. Eventually, they dread their own silence, because that's when they hear your name in their mind, and they feel the weight of what they did. They can fool the world, but they can't fool themselves. Not forever. This isn't revenge. This is nature correcting itself. In Stoic philosophy, every action has a consequence. Not always immediately, but always inevitably. When you hurt someone who was real with you, someone loyal, kind, and genuine, you don't just lose them, you lose a piece of your own peace. Suddenly, their energy is gone from your life. The blessing they were no longer surrounds you, and that emptiness starts echoing. A wake-up call for us too. There's something for us to take away from this as well. Your peace is your greatest currency. Protect it. Don't waste it proving you were right. Don't break it trying to make them feel guilty. Just walk away. Silently. Powerfully. With dignity. Because when peace starts crumbling in their life, when their own conscience becomes their punishment, that's when you'll know something bigger than you is already working, and it's doing a far better job than revenge ever could. There's a moment often unnoticed when life begins to quietly shut the doors for those who use their free will to cause harm. It doesn't come with a thunderstorm or a dramatic warning. It comes subtly and relentlessly. They think they're still in control, still winning, still untouchable. But behind the curtain of their ego, life is recalibrating. The law of withdrawal. When someone intentionally hurts a good person, they don't just hurt the individual, they interfere with a greater energy. They touch what should have never been violated: genuine loyalty, trust, love, and human dignity. And when that happens, the universe responds not with rage, but with silence and strategic removal. Opportunities dry up. Connections grow cold. People start walking away for reasons they can't explain. It's not always punishment. Sometimes it's simply alignment. Life no longer supports someone who betrayed its own design. No door stays open forever. They may laugh in the moment, assuming they got away clean. But slowly, one by one, the doors that were once open begin to close. The job offer they were counting on gone. That loyal friend they once manipulated now distant. The admiration they used to receive replaced with suspicion. The easy path suddenly full of resistance. They'll blame bad luck. They'll blame timing. But deep down, some part of them knows this is fallout. A quiet storm, perfectly timed. Have you ever seen someone who once had everything: respect, influence, opportunity, suddenly lose their footing? People say they just changed, or their energy feels off. No, it's not that they changed. It's that truth finally caught up to them. The weight of dishonor always catches up. Sometimes it arrives as a lost contract. Other times, as a sudden illness, a betrayal they didn't see coming, or an unexplained series of misfortunes. Not as revenge, as recalibration. They thought it was about you. It never was. When someone wrongs you and walks away, they think the story ends there. They think their future is still intact because you stayed quiet, or you chose healing over retaliation. But the truth is, you were the test, not the target, not the threat. The test of whether they'd honor what was sacred, and they failed. So now, life removes them from paths they were never meant to walk, not out of cruelty, but to protect others from the same damage. Emotional intelligence. Observing without needing proof. When you have emotional intelligence, you don't obsess over how karma will unfold. You don't need to see them fall. You just watch the doors. You'll notice they don't smile like they used to. They repeat patterns of dysfunction. They sabotage their own progress. They feel stuck without knowing why. This isn't coincidence. This is cause and effect operating on a level they no longer perceive. A lesson from nature. Think of a tree whose roots have rotted. The branches may still look green. The leaves still sway in the wind. But underground, the decay has begun. And one day, without warning, it collapses because what sustained it from within no longer exists. That's what happens when someone loses the protection that once surrounded them because of your presence. You weren't just part of their life. You were a blessing that held things together. And once they betrayed that blessing, the root began to rot. Don't knock on the door, they locked from the inside. Let this be a warning to you. 2. When life removes someone from your path after they hurt you, don't chase them. Don't knock on closed doors. Don't interfere with divine correction. Because if you try to reattach what life is trying to release, you'll only absorb the fallout meant for them. Stay still. Stay silent. Let the doors close. It's not the end. It's protection. For you, and it's accountability. For them, at first, they feel untouchable. They walk away from what they did to you, convinced it's over, that the silence from your end is weakness, that your refusal to fight back is proof they won. But what they don't realize is life is setting up the mirror, and when it's ready, it won't just show them who they've become, it will make them feel everything they made you feel. Life doesn't always use punishment, it uses reflection. The most divine form of justice isn't loud. It's not thunder, wrath, or fire raining down. It's this. You betray love. Life shows you what it feels like to be unloved. You lie. Life surrounds you with deception. You abandon someone loyal. Life makes you feel forgotten. They don't see it coming. But when it comes, they'll look around and say, "Why does everyone treat me like this? Why can't I find someone who really stays? Why do people keep using me?" The answer isn't in the world around them. It's in their past. What they did to you becomes their new reality. They made you feel invisible. Now no one sees them. They made you doubt yourself. Now they live in self-doubt. They played with your emotions. Now they're surrounded by people who don't take them seriously. They taught life how to teach them. And life listened. They mocked your silence. Now theirs is unbearable. You sat in silence, trying to heal, trying to make sense of pain that never should have been yours. They mocked your withdrawal, laughed at your introspection, called you weak, overly emotional, too sensitive. Now they live in silence too, but not the peaceful kind. Their silence is haunted. They replay conversations, reread old messages, revisit places where they felt your energy. Except this time, you're not there. The silence that once empowered you is now the silence that condemns them. When emotional consequences hit harder than physical ones, there are wounds that money can't fix. There are pains no apology can soothe. And when someone begins to experience what they once caused, the impact isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. It eats away at the soul, because deep down, they know, this is what I did to someone who truly cared for me. That realization doesn't just hurt, it reshapes them if they're humble, or breaks them if they're proud. A pattern only they can recognize and fear from the outside. Others might not even notice. But they do. They see it in how no one believes them now, in how their relationships feel shallow, in how people walk away without closure, just like they once did to you. It's a pattern only they can trace back to its origin. And the origin is you. More precisely, what they did to you. The gift of quiet transformation. Here's what you need to understand. You didn't need to curse them. You didn't need to fight them. You just needed to survive the storm they caused so they could walk into one of their own. And when they do, they'll realize something chilling. I created this. Not you. Not karma. Them. And that mirror, it doesn't lie. It doesn't flinch. And it never shows mercy to the unrepentant. Don't watch the mirror walk past it. You don't need to watch their downfall. You don't need to analyze their karma. Because when you keep looking back, you become part of their story again. Let the mirror do what it was created to do. And let your growth be the only reflection you care about. You're not who they hurt anymore. You're not stuck in that chapter. You're walking forward with quiet confidence and the kind of inner peace they may never find again. In the beginning, they didn't see it. Or maybe they refused to. They saw you as ordinary, replaceable. Someone who was always there. Always kind. Always forgiving. But now that you're gone, now that your presence has become absence, something is different. They don't miss you because you begged. They don't regret it because you punished them. They miss you because life doesn't feel the same anymore. And for the first time, they realize I didn't just lose a person, I lost a blessing. The difference between attention and presence. They thought you were just another person in their life, someone to pass time with, to lean on, or even to control. But your value was never in the noise you made. It was in the peace you brought. It was in the way your presence made the room calmer. The chaos quieter. The future feel a little less heavy. You didn't demand attention. You gave stability. You didn't manipulate. You uplifted. And now, the people around them feel different. Shallow. Conditional. Restless. They look back and think, why did I feel so secure back then? Why was I better when they were in my life? They won't admit it out loud. But internally, they know you were the anchor. You were the quiet light in their storm. They mistook your calmness for weakness. They mistook your forgiveness for foolishness. They mistook your consistency for naivety. But what they didn't understand was that your strength was quiet. Your kindness wasn't desperation. Your loyalty wasn't blindness. It was conscious, chosen, rare. And now that they've gone through people who offer drama instead of peace, validation instead of truth, possession instead of love, they see the difference. They feel it like an echo that won't stop. I had something sacred, and I broke it. The illusion of options fades fast. There's a cruel trick the ego plays. It convinces people that there's always someone better, that if someone holds them accountable, they're too much, that if someone walks away, they'll find better energy, and sometimes they do. For a little while, until they meet people who mirror their dysfunction instead of healing it, until they realize admiration without depth means nothing, until they're surrounded by those who want what you gave but without becoming who you were. And that's when it hits them. They didn't just lose a person, they lost the peace that person carried. And peace isn't something you can fake. It's something you feel when the right soul is near. A real example. The friend who woke up too late. One man told a story of a friend he used, mocked, and ignored. She was always kind, always patient, even when he was cruel. Eventually, she walked away. No drama, just silence. Years later, after a series of failed relationships, betrayals, and inner collapse, he said, "I thought she was boring, but she was the only one who ever truly cared. The only one who gave without expecting. I was too blind to see that she was the blessing." He tried reaching out, but her number had changed. She had outgrown the version of herself that allowed his presence. She didn't hate him. She just healed beyond his reach. Why silence is the final proof of value. There's something haunting about being ignored by someone who used to care deeply, not because they're being cruel, but because it proves that they've elevated to a space where your chaos no longer has access. Your silence isn't punishment. It's evolution. It says, "I was the blessing, and now I've withdrawn that blessing." They'll feel it when they try to replicate your energy and fail. They'll feel it when they meet people who only give what they're trying to get. They'll feel it in their restless nights, unfinished conversations, and unsent messages. Let them learn without you. You were the warmth in winter, the calm in the storm, the clarity in their confusion. But now they're left with what they chose, a life without your light. And here's the most powerful part. You don't need to say a word. You don't need to watch them spiral. You don't need to update them on how well you're doing. Your absence says everything. It says you had something pure. You mishandled it. And now, it's gone. Not out of hate, out of self-respect. You didn't have to lift a finger, didn't have to expose them, didn't have to seek revenge, because life, patient and precise, has a way of returning the very experience they put you through, wrapped in a new disguise, one they can't escape. It's not about punishment. It's about reflection. And the lesson always lands harder when it arrives dressed like their own behavior. The setup is quiet. The impact is brutal. They made you feel small. Now they're being belittled. They made you feel invisible. Now they're being ignored. They exploited your empathy. Now they're being used by someone who fakes it better. And here's the twist. They don't even realize it at first. At first, they feel drawn to someone new, thinking, "This is exciting. This feels powerful." But it's not power, it's familiarity. They've just met a version of themselves, and soon enough, they'll begin to taste the very bitterness they once served you, the emotional trap they can't escape. You remember what it felt like, constant confusion, doubting your worth, waiting for clarity that never came, being blamed for things you didn't do now. They live in that fog. They're suddenly unsure if they're too much, if they're not enough, or if the people around them secretly resent them. Welcome to the emotional chaos they created. It's not fun when the mirror doesn't flatter. It's terrifying when you realize you're stuck in the same trap you once set for someone else. Why karma doesn't show up in the way they expect. They expect karma to be a car crash, a scandal, a fall from grace. But karma is far more sophisticated. It sends them someone who uses their insecurities against them, makes them question their value, praises them in public but undermines them in private. Love bombs them, then goes cold, withdraws emotionally right when they start to care. And just like that, They find themselves chasing closure from someone who mirrors everything they once were. It's poetic and painful because there's nowhere to hide from yourself. The moment of realization hits hard. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds. One morning, they wake up feeling exhausted, not from work, from emotional weight. And the thought finally creeps in, wait. Is this how I made them feel? The shame is quiet, but deep, and it lingers especially because they can't apologize to themselves. They might try to apologize to you, but by then, you've grown too far. You're no longer even available to validate their awakening. You've become untouchable, not out of spite. But evolution, you were the lesson they never saw coming in hurting you. They thought they were in control, but life made you their mirror, their reckoning, their unspoken teacher. Now, every time they get mistreated, every time they're ghosted, dismissed, or manipulated, they're reminded of you, not because you're doing anything, but because their own actions have found their way back home. That's karma, not revenge, just a deeply personal education, emotional intelligence. Why you don't need to witness it. Let go of the urge to check in on them, to see if they're suffering, to track the ripple effect. Because emotionally intelligent people don't need proof. They know what you do to others, especially to those who only meant you well. Comes back, not always immediately, not always visibly, but always precisely. So instead of watching their karma unfold, focus on your own peace, your new boundaries, your quiet confidence. Let their storm rage. You're building something stronger now, your strength. You didn't become what hurt you. That's what makes you powerful. You didn't mirror their cruelty. You didn't become bitter, manipulative, or cold. You healed. You grew. And now you're the version of yourself they could never break. And that realization that you made it out while they stayed trapped in their own cycle is the most humbling consequence of all. There's something uniquely frustrating about watching someone hurt you and walk away as if nothing happened, smiling, thriving, praised by others, untouched by the wreckage they left behind. You sit there, heartbroken, mind spinning, wondering, do they ever pay for what they did? Do they just get to walk away? But that's where most people misunderstand the nature of divine justice. It doesn't show up on your timeline. It shows up when it teaches the deepest lesson, and when it does, it doesn't whisper. It changes their entire life. Why justice doesn't come early? If justice arrived the moment someone hurt you, they'd never understand what they did. They'd dismiss it as bad luck, blame someone else, call it karma for another mistake. But when it comes later, after they've convinced themselves they were right, after they've settled into the illusion of winning, after they've forgotten how they treated you, that's when it hits hardest, because now there's no confusion, no one else to blame, no coincidence to hide behind, just silence and a reckoning. The delay is your protection. 2. You may think that justice delayed is justice denied, but sometimes the delay is for your own growth. If karma had arrived instantly, you may have stuck around just to witness it. You'd still be emotionally entangled, looking over your shoulder, needing to see them fall. But now you've outgrown the need to watch. You've healed too far to care. And that's why it works so perfectly. When you no longer need to see it, when you're no longer obsessed with closure, that's usually when it happens. And ironically, you won't even feel joy, just confirmation. Life is not on your clock, it's on divine rhythm. We live in a world obsessed with speed, fast answers, fast results, fast karma. But spiritual justice doesn't work like a vending machine. It works like seasons. There's a planting season, a growing season, a silent season, and finally a harvest. What they did planted seeds, but the fruit takes time to ripen. When it does, it doesn't just show them what they did. It confronts them with who they've become. That's far more powerful than any quick revenge. You don't need to be there when it happens. You might imagine one day they'll call, admit everything, beg for forgiveness. But here's what really happens. They sit in silence too, ashamed to reach out. They remember you in moments they can't explain. They see your name, your face, your energy. In every act of kindness they'll never receive again. And they carry the weight alone. Because that's what divine justice does. It isolates those who never valued connection. A real story, the one who laughed too soon. There's a woman whose husband left her for someone more exciting. He gloated on social media, bragged about his upgrade, and humiliated her publicly. She stayed silent, rebuilt her life, healed in private. 5 years later, his new relationship collapsed. He was left alone, bankrupt, and estranged from his kids. She never responded to his messages, not because she hated him, but because she no longer lived in the same emotional world. She said, "By the time life gave him what he deserved, I no longer needed to see it. I had my peace, and that was enough." Emotional intelligence. Let the delay humble you, not break you. When justice takes its time, don't let bitterness rot your spirit. Don't assume silence means God or life or the universe forgot. Instead, use that time to build your spiritual discipline, your emotional resilience, your psychological clarity, your sense of self-worth that no one can steal. Because when justice comes, it won't just deal with them, it will elevate you. When justice arrives, you'll barely notice, because you've outgrown the pain. And that's the beauty of the divine delay. By the time the ones who hurt you face their consequences, you won't be waiting. You'll be too busy thriving. And maybe, just maybe, when they realize what's happening, they'll look at your name, shake their head, and whisper, "I shouldn't have done them like that. That was my blessing, and I lost it forever." Sometimes, what feels like rejection is actually redirection. And what feels like abandonment is actually protection. You thought they left you. You thought the door closed because you weren't enough. But what if it wasn't their choice at all? What if God removed you first? You didn't walk away. You were pulled out. There are moments in life that don't make sense when they happen. A relationship ends suddenly. A job opportunity slips away. A friend you trusted turns on you. A betrayal cuts you from behind. You blame yourself. You replay every detail. You think, maybe if I did more, if I gave more. But here's the truth. You weren't meant to stay. You were being pulled out of a space that would have destroyed your spirit. You just didn't see it yet. God sees the conversations you're not in. You don't know what they said about you behind closed doors. You don't see the traps they were planning. You don't hear the way they laughed while you were crying, but God does. He hears the things you never would have believed. He sees the patterns you were too loyal to question, and instead of giving you more signs, He gave you an exit. It may have felt violent, sudden, confusing, but it was surgical. He removed you from poison before it could reach your soul. It didn't fall apart, it fell into place. We often pray for peace, for clarity, for strength, but we rarely realize that to get those things, some structures in our lives have to collapse. And when they do, vepanits. But here's what you must remember. Your prayer was heard. You just didn't recognize the answer. The friendship ended. The relationship broke. The connection died. But your peace began. Your clarity increased. And your soul started healing. That's not a loss. That's deliverance. Real life example. She disappeared before I could ruin her. A man once admitted, "There was a woman who loved me deeply. I was selfish. I used her emotions. I lied. I manipulated. But before I could destroy her completely, she vanished. She went, no contact. Never explained. Never returned." He said, "Now I know why. She didn't leave me. God pulled her out before I could damage something I wasn't qualified to hold. She didn't wait for the final blow. She was rescued before it landed." Spiritual discipline is trusting the exit without needing closure. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is trust the silence. Trust the unanswered prayer. Trust the door that slammed shut without warning. But real faith doesn't demand full understanding. It moves forward anyway. You don't need to know why it ended. You don't need to know what they said. You don't even need an apology. What you need is to trust that your protection was prioritized over your comfort. God removed you not because you were weak, but because you were precious. Your absence was your salvation. The moment you disappeared from their life, they lost access to your grace, your loyalty, your light. They didn't notice at first, but eventually when things stopped feeling right, they realized something sacred had been withdrawn. And by then, you were unreachable. Not because you were hiding, but because divine protection is a one-way door. Once it closes, it doesn't reopen. Not for manipulation, not for false apologies, not for nostalgia, only for truth. And by the time they're ready to be honest, you've already healed. Your job now, honor the exit. You don't need to chase explanations. You don't need to re-enter a room God already pulled you from. You don't need to fix what was never yours to carry. Instead, build your inner peace. Guard your spirit. Stay in alignment with your purpose. Respect the quiet exits God orchestrated for your growth, because the ones who hurt you will one day realize what they lost. But by then, you'll be too far gone to reach. And that's not vengeance. That's protection fulfilled. They didn't realize it while they had you. Because light doesn't announce itself. It just shines quietly, faithfully, endlessly. You were the calm in their chaos, the forgiveness they never deserved, the understanding they never earned, the presence that made their world warmer without asking for anything in return, and they threw it away. Why? Because when people are used to dysfunction, they confuse peace with boredom. And when they're addicted to control, they mistake gentleness for weakness. So they discarded you, thinking you'd always be available, thinking you'd come back, thinking you'd never realize your worth. But now, in your absence, reality is sinking in. The suffering begins quietly. It doesn't happen in a single moment. It begins in small, ordinary cracks. A conversation that falls flat because you're not there to carry it. A rough day with no one to soothe them. A moment of fear with no calming voice. An achievement, but no one who truly cares. That's when your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. They scroll through old messages. They check your social media in silence. They think about texting, but don't, because they know they broke something they can't rebuild. They won't admit it, but they feel it deeply. You were the one who listened when they didn't know how to express. You stayed when they pushed everyone else away. You gave, and gave, and gave, until they assumed it was your default setting. Now they're surrounded by noise, but no connection. They're surrounded by people, but no peace. They're in relationships, but feel completely alone. They may post like they're winning, laugh like they've moved on, smile like they've healed. But in the quiet moments, they remember you, not because of who they were with you, but because of who they'll never be again without you. Why the regret is deeper than guilt. This isn't just I feel bad for what I did. This is spiritual regret, the kind that whispers, you'll never find someone like that again. You hurt the safest place you ever had. You lost your blessing and it's not coming back. Guilt is about actions. Regret is about consequences. But silent regret, that's about identity. They're not just sad, they lost you. They're shattered by who they became to push you away. And the worst part, there's no going back. Emotional intelligence, why your silence hurts more than revenge. They expected rage. They expected confrontation. They were ready for the argument, the blame, the emotional drama. But you gave them none of it. You gave them silence. And that silence became a mirror, reflecting everything they tried to avoid. The lies, the betrayal, the manipulation, the cowardice, because silence doesn't defend itself. It just exposes what words can't. And in that silence, they finally saw themselves. Real life parallel. I didn't realize she was the last person who truly cared. A man once said, I broke up with her like it was nothing. I thought she was too sensitive, too emotional. I wanted someone who challenged me less. Now I realize she was the only one who ever loved me without an agenda. And I pushed her away trying to feel powerful. He didn't cry when she left. He cried 2 years later, alone. Successful on paper, surrounded by shallow people who only liked the version of him he faked. He said, now I understand. Losing her wasn't a moment. It was a slow collapse of everything real in my life. You were never too much. You were more than they could hold. They told you you're too emotional. You're too intense. You care too much. But now they miss that intensity. Now they miss that emotion. Now they crave someone who cares. You weren't too much. You were everything they didn't have the capacity to receive. You were light in a world that preferred darkness. Your power. You didn't have to prove anything. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You didn't try to make them understand. You walked away with quiet dignity, and now they live with the reality that your silence is louder than their excuses. They'll never admit it, but they'll always feel it. Because once you've experienced real peace, nothing else compares. And once you've lost it, you never stop searching. You were kind. They were cruel. You gave endlessly. They took without remorse. You loved from the soul. They used you to fill a void, and when it ended, they walked away with a smirk. While you were left picking up pieces of a heart they never intended to protect. The world looked on and saw nothing. No apology, no justice, no closure. But what the world doesn't see, God does. He saw the nights you cried silently, not the posts you deleted, not the texts you never sent, not the pain you buried just to function. He saw the battle behind your eyes when you smiled in front of others. He saw the betrayal, the gaslighting, the manipulation, and when you thought no one would ever speak up for you, he took notes, not in rage, but in precision, because God's justice doesn't arrive on your timeline. It arrives on His. The scales of justice don't rust in silence. Just because you didn't retaliate doesn't mean they got away with it. God doesn't measure by public outcomes. He measures by private motives. They thought they escaped. But what they didn't understand is the delay of justice is not the denial of it. Sometimes God lets them believe they're winning, so when the fall comes, they'll have no one to blame but their own reflection. That's not revenge. That's divine balance. Why their life begins to unravel in unexpected ways. It's never dramatic. It's never instant. But slowly, their relationships feel empty. Their trust collapses. Their reputation erodes in subtle whispers. Their confidence turns into paranoia, and they start to feel it, a weight with no name. They can't explain why peace avoids them, why nothing truly satisfies them anymore, why success feels hollow, why love feels distant. It's not a curse, it's consequence, because when you violate the sacred energy of a soul that meant no harm, the universe reconfigures itself to teach you. God doesn't avenge for entertainment. He restores for purpose. He doesn't hurt them just to make you feel better. He humbles them to give them a chance to reflect. Because divine justice isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's revelation. It's the moment they wake up one day and realize, I had something real, and I destroyed it. It's the moment they recognize every prayer you whispered over them is now the protection you carry into your next chapter without them. Spiritual discipline means trusting invisible justice. You may never see their breakdown. You may never hear their apology. You may never know how much they regret. But justice isn't for your entertainment. It's for your evolution. You didn't walk away with proof. You walked away with peace. And that peace, that's your reward. Let God handle what they did. Let the universe echo the pain they caused. Let the silence speak in places your voice never could. You don't need to tell your story to the world. God already wrote it in full. You didn't lose. You were preserved. While they were playing with your loyalty, God was preparing something greater. While they laughed at your pain, God was building your next level. And when they finally fall into the hole they dug for you, you won't even be looking back. You'll be too far ahead. Tu volved. too blessed to return to the place you were rescued from. Let the unseen justice unfold while you rise in silence, because the greatest act of spiritual confidence is this: to no longer need their apology, their explanation, or their downfall. You don't rise by dragging others down. You rise by refusing to sink with them. And when God sees that He restores you, elevates you, protects you, because you honored His justice, by never becoming like the ones who hurt you. There's a quiet kind of power that doesn't show up on social media. No spotlight, no applause, no trending hashtag. It's the power of restraint, of not clapping back, of not matching their energy, of not becoming who hurt you. And to the world, it looks like weakness, but to heaven, it looks like wisdom, because anyone can react, but few can remain composed when every part of them wants to scream. Heaven watches what man ignores when they mocked your silence. God was noting your strength when they laughed while you cried. He was recording your faithfulness. They thought they got away with it, but God was only watching what you would do with the pain. Would you seek vengeance? Would you destroy them back? Would you betray your own soul just to feel momentarily powerful? You didn't. You chose restraint. And restraint is the language of kings. Why silence is sacred in spiritual warfare. Your silence didn't mean surrender. It meant strategy. It meant you refused to fight battles that didn't belong to you. It meant you knew, what I'm dealing with is not just flesh and blood, it's spiritual. And my victory doesn't need to be loud. You let God fight what your hands couldn't. You didn't block their karma by trying to speed it up. You didn't sabotage your growth by chasing closure. You held the line. You kept your peace, and heaven took notice. The reward is not revenge, it's elevation. You won't always get revenge, but you will get restoration. And that's more powerful. Peace that can't be stolen, joy that's not dependent on who stays, relationships that align with your healed self, opportunities that feel like divine compensation, confidence that doesn't need validation. You'll look around and realize, what I thought I lost was nothing compared to what I was being prepared for, because God doesn't repay you with pity. He repays you with purpose. Real life parallel. The one who stayed silent rose the highest. There's a woman who was publicly humiliated by someone she trusted. She never exposed him, never fought online, never told the full story. People called her weak. 3 years later, she built a company, wrote a book, found love that honored her, and the man still stuck in cycles of shallow validation. She didn't rise by revenge, she rose by resilience. And that's what restraint does. It builds your throne while others play in the mud. The most terrifying thing to those who hurt you is your growth. You didn't stay broken. You didn't stay angry. You didn't stay in the chapter they left you in. You became something untouchable, and now they can't reach you. Not because you're cold, but because you're healed. They expected your silence to be passive, but it was sacred. It was your shield. It was your sword. It was your transformation in progress. God's greatest reward is not what you gain, it's who you become in choosing peace. You became powerful. In choosing restraint, you gained clarity. In choosing not to fight evil with evil, you broke generational patterns. That's the reward. You didn't just survive the betrayal. You became wiser, more grounded, more aligned with your calling. And now, you walk with quiet confidence, not because life didn't wound you, but because it couldn't break what God was building in you. Closing line. So next time they wonder how you're still standing, how you're still glowing, how you're still growing without them, tell them this: I gave it to God, and He gave me back myself. You didn't lose. You were preserved. You were protected. And now, you've been promoted. They hurt you. They walked away. And they thought you'd never recover. But what they didn't know was that silence was your weapon. And God was your witness. You didn't beg. You didn't break. You became unshakable. And now, you don't even need to prove them wrong. Your peace already did. So if you're walking this road, if you've ever been betrayed, discarded, mocked for staying silent, know this: heaven has heard every silent tear. Justice is already moving behind the scenes, and your next chapter will not be written by the ones who tried to destroy you. It will be written by the strength you chose when you could have chosen revenge. If this message spoke to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this truth. Subscribe to Think Stoic 101 for weekly wisdom to help you master emotional intelligence, protect your peace, and rise with quiet power. And comment below: I choose peace over revenge. I choose growth over bitterness. Let the world know what side of the battle you stand on. Your silence is not weakness. It's spiritual discipline. And it will take you further than noise ever could. The war is over, but your rise has just begun.